Elliot Mason, once celebrated in glossy magazines and tech expos, had grown weary of the world he helped build. Surrounded by opportunists and gold diggers, he longed to feel genuine human connection again, something untouched by status or wealth. So, one rainy morning, he did something no one would expect. He traded his tailored suits for thrifted clothes, tousled his neatly combed hair, and drove his dusty old truck to a quiet little diner on the edge of town. His reflection in the window was barely recognizable, a man with tired eyes, calloused hands, and a story no one would guess. As he stepped inside, the bell above the door gave a soft chime. The warmth of the diner contrasted sharply with the cold drizzle outside. It smelled of fresh coffee and homemade pie, and the sound of clinking dishes filled the air. Patrons barely noticed him. He shuffled to the back booth, avoiding eye contact, pretending to be just another drifter. That was the point. Elliot wasn't there for the food or the coffee. He was there to see how people treated someone who had nothing to offer. Would they ignore him? Judge him? Pity him? Or would someone, anyone, see beyond the worn clothes and treat him like a human being? He was testing kindness, not to shame others, but to restore his own faith in people. After years of being admired for his money, he needed to know, was compassion still alive in a world obsessed with status? Sitting in that booth, unnoticed and unimportant, Elliot waited, not just for a meal, but for an answer. What happened next would touch his heart in ways he never expected, and change two lives forever. The rain tapped gently against the diner windows as Elliot settled into the corner booth, his clothes damp, his shoulders hunched. The warmth of the place was inviting, but what struck him most wasn't the heat, it was the young waitress who approached him. Her name tag read Lena, and though her eyes carried the weight of a long shift, her smile was effortless, sincere. She didn't glance at his ragged coat or his weathered face with judgment. Instead, she welcomed him like he belonged there, as if he wasn't just another stranger seeking shelter from the storm. "Can I get you something warm, sir?" she asked, her voice soft but full of kindness. He mumbled a quiet request for just a cup of coffee, not wanting to overstay his welcome, or spend more than he needed to. She nodded and walked away, not questioning, not prying. But when she returned, she didn't just bring coffee. In her hands was a steaming bowl of soup, freshly made and hearty. "This one's on the house," she said gently. "Rain like this calls for something more than caffeine." Elliot stared at the soup, stunned. It wasn't pity he saw in her eyes, it was genuine care. She had likely served dozens of customers that day, yet still found the grace to see him, not as a burden, but as someone who mattered. That small gesture, that unspoken understanding, hit him harder than he expected. He hadn't been treated like a person in a long time, just a bank account or a transaction. But here, in a small diner on a rainy afternoon, a tired waitress reminded him of something rare, compassion without condition. And that was priceless. The afternoon wore on, and the diner slowly emptied as the rain outside turned into a steady drizzle. Elliot remained in his corner, quietly observing. Lena moved from table to table, her apron stained and her ponytail loosening, but her smile never faded. She refilled coffee cups, asked about grandkids, laughed at old jokes, even offered extra napkins to a child who'd spilled ketchup. Every customer, no matter who they were, received the same gentle care. There was no favoritism, no performance. Just a young woman doing her job with heart. Elliot, still nursing the coffee she'd given him, reached out to take a sip. His fingers shook, whether from age, nerves, or the chill, even he wasn't sure. The cup wobbled slightly, almost slipping from his grasp. Before it could fall, Lena appeared beside him, as if she'd been watching all along. She didn't flinch or make a scene. She simply placed her hands over his and steadied the cup. "It's cold today," she said with a soft smile, gently helping him lift it. "But I hope this warms your heart." In that moment, something shifted in Elliot. She wasn't just offering warmth from a mug, she was offering dignity, care, and something far more powerful than charity, presence. She didn't see an old man who might not tip well. She saw a person. Her kindness wasn't grand or dramatic, it was quiet, thoughtful, and real. As she walked away to check on another table, Elliot sat still, the cup warming both his hands and something deeper inside him. It had been a long time since someone touched his soul like that, not with money, not with flattery, but with pure, human kindness. And it moved him more than he ever expected. The next morning, the diner buzzed with its usual early customers, truck drivers, schoolteachers, locals grabbing their morning coffee. Lena was behind the counter, her hair tied back neatly, sleeves rolled up, ready for another long shift. The rain had cleared, but the chill lingered in the air. Then, outside the window, a sleek black car pulled into the parking lot. Heads turned. It was the kind of car that didn't belong in a quiet, roadside diner. The door opened, and a man in a sharp, tailored suit stepped out. His hair was neatly combed, his shoes polished. Lena watched, confused, until their eyes met. Her heart skipped. It was him. The quiet man from yesterday. But this was a completely different person. As he walked in, the diner's chatter faded into silence. Elliot smiled warmly. "Good morning, Lena," he said, placing a small envelope on the counter. "You probably don't recognize me like this." She blinked, stunned. "It's you." "I wanted to see if kindness still existed," he said gently. "If someone would give from the heart without expecting anything in return. And you did. You passed the test." Lena's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter offering her a full scholarship to culinary school, tuition, housing, everything covered. Tucked behind it was a check for $50,000. Enough to start her dream bakery. Her eyes welled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Just promise me one thing," Elliot said with a smile. "Never lose that heart. The world needs more of it." The diner erupted into soft gasps and claps, but Lena stood still, overwhelmed by the moment. She had no idea that her small act of kindness would change her life forever. 1 year later, the scent of fresh bread and warm cinnamon filled the air as a line of customers wrapped around the corner of a charming little bakery named Kind Crumbs. Painted in soft pastels with flower boxes in the windows, it felt less like a business and more like a second home. Inside, Lena moved behind the counter with confidence and joy, her apron dusted with flour, her laughter echoing through the space. Locals came not just for her famous blueberry muffins, but for the warmth in her words, the way she remembered names, and the comfort that came with every visit. The community had embraced her, not just as a baker, but as a symbol of what kindness could do. On the wall behind the register hung a photo, Lena and a sharply dressed Elliot, taken on the bakery's opening day. Beneath it, a simple quote, "Give without expecting, receive more than you dreamed." And every Sunday, like clockwork, a familiar black car would park outside. Elliot, now a regular, took his usual seat by the window, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "Kindness is power." He never came with fanfare, never asked for recognition. He just smiled, proud of the seed he'd helped plant, and even more proud of the woman who watered it with heart. Lena always made time for him, no matter how busy the day. A refill, a shared laugh, a quiet moment between old friends. Because in the end, it wasn't just about soup or scholarships or money. It was about a simple truth: when you lead with kindness, you don't just change the world for someone else, you change your own world too. This story reminds us that the most powerful transformations often begin with the simplest gestures. Elliot, a man who had everything money could buy, went searching for something priceless: genuine kindness. In Lena, he found not just a compassionate soul, but a reminder that true humanity shines brightest in quiet, selfless moments. She didn't help him for a reward or recognition, she helped because it was the right thing to do. And that single act of warmth sparked a chain of events that changed both their lives forever. In a world that can often feel cold or transactional, Kind Crumb stands as a symbol of what happens when we lead with heart. It shows us that you don't need wealth or power to make an impact, just a willingness to see others, to care, and to give without expecting. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness isn't small at all, it's everything.